I wanted to say something a little bit more about the COVID situation, about the corona situation, because I think this is really important. And there are two things that I would like to address, two things that I would like to talk about. The first thing is simply the issue of face masks. Does it help or not? There are two camps, there are two fronts, two perspectives on this. The professional scientific standpoint is mostly that face masks doesn't help too much because the virus is too small, right? The virus is really very small, so the face mask doesn't actually help because of the size of the virus. It's 10 times smaller than a bacteria. It's a nano size. It's incredibly small. And this is why experts, so-called experts in this world, say that face mask actually doesn't help too much. So they don't advise the public to use it. Or they didn't advise the public to use it for a long period of time. Only health professionals should use it because, of course, because it would help the health professionals. And what's the difference between a health professional and a normal human being? None. When it comes to infections, there are absolutely no difference. A nurse who sits beside me is absolutely in any way not different from me. So even if I go to a hospital, why should I not be protected against infections? But the nurse should be. Well, of course it makes sense, but it's just the argument is completely silly, right? It's so stupid. And so I will say the thing that I have to say about it. Okay, the virus is very small, so many face masks doesn't help because you need a real professional face mask in order to protect yourself against the virus. Real professional, tight mechanism in a way, as a face mask that is in such a way that it actually protects against the virus, because it protects against that kind of small entities, that kind of small bacteria, virus cells in a way. So you need a real professional face mask for it in order to help. And I will say that actually this is wrong. And the reason why this is wrong is because the virus never travels alone. A virus travels in a medium, And the fact that the experts doesn't understand this, the fact that the experts doesn't understand that it doesn't matter how small the virus is. It has absolutely no significance at all. Or, of course, it has significance, but of course, the smaller it is, the more difficult it is to contain it or to protect yourself against it. But a virus never travels alone. A virus travels in a medium, right? It's same like red blood cell, white blood cell. How does a red blood cell travel? Well, it travels in blood, right? Well, it's a little bit silly comparison, but a virus travels in a medium, and that medium is humidity. It's phlegm, water, saliva, or fatty substances, but fluids. Virus travels in fluids, some kind of fluids, and there are fluids everywhere. And this is why we get infected, usually because viruses and bacteria very often travels in fluids. It travels in mediums, So even if you have a quite poor face mask, it will still protect you some, because the virus travels in the medium of humidity, in the medium of water, in the medium of greasy substances, When people cough or sneeze, the virus doesn't travel alone. It travels in an entity of humidity. And because the entity of humidity which contains the virus is swimming around in a little droplet, right? the droplet of humidity that carries the virus, that will face your face mask, or it will enter your lungs or your nose or your eyes very easily. So the whole issue about these experts who has a little bit of education because they went 10 years to university and they have 2 PhDs, in virus and epidemics and pandemics, it's not enough because they simply don't understand the basics. A virus doesn't travel alone. It doesn't matter how much education you have about a virus. That's great. We need that. We need the scientific knowledge about the virus. That's what the WHO is for. That's what science and education is for. But when it comes to educating the public, when it comes to addressing this issue to the population in this world, we have to tell the people of this world, well, why does it make sense to protect ourselves, especially when we enter certain areas like hospitals or trams or buses or airplanes or supermarkets or shops or classrooms at schools and so forth? Well, because the virus situation and the infection situation is like this, that viruses never travels alone. They travel in humidity, in droplets of water, or let's say in tiny droplets of humidity. That is the medium in which the virus travels, usually. I may be quite wrong about this in some sense, but I'm also a little bit right about it, or perhaps even quite right about it. The thing that we need to know is a face mask will protect you. Of course, the face mask will protect you to a higher degree the more professional or the higher quality it is. The lesser quality, the less protection. But it will still protect you from something. If you're sitting on a bus and your neighbor on the bus is coughing, you have no protection whatsoever if you don't have anything to cover you. If you put your scarf in front of, and use your scarf as a face mask, you will have some protection, because the virus that he has in his body will travel out of his body through droplets of humidity, through droplets of water or phlegm or saliva or whatever, Tiny droplets. Tiny droplets, but these droplets are bigger than the virus. So it doesn't matter to talk about how big the virus is. You should talk about how big is the droplet. So practically there are two ways, that the infection happens. Because the virus travels in droplets. Sometimes those droplets are so big, they come from coughing. When a person coughs or sneezes, the virus will leave the body in a quite huge, let's say the word huge, droplet. The droplet is bigger, which means that the weight is heavier, so there is gravity. That droplet is going to fall to the ground within, let's say, 5 minutes. If you don't get it into your face, if you're further away than 2 meters, you will probably not get it, or you will have some protection by that 2 meters because of gravity, because the droplet is big enough to be affected by gravity. This is very important to understand. The droplet which carries the virus is big enough to be affected by gravity. This is what professors should teach you. This is what experts should teach you, so that you understand it. Sometimes the medium in which the virus travels is big enough, heavy enough to be affected by gravity. It will fall down to the ground after 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or even 1 minute, if it's big enough, if it's heavy enough. But you still can get the infection if you're closer than 2 meters. If you're closer than 2 meters to this person, you can still get infected, even if the droplet is big enough to be affected by gravity. Then there's a second way that the virus can infect you, And that is through droplets that are much smaller. But it's the same thing, it's just the size of the droplet. When a person who has this infection is breathing, small, tiny, 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 tiny droplets, which still are the medium of the virus, which still carries the medium out into open space. They are so small that they are not affected by gravity in the same way. So they stay floating in the air, depending on the situation of the airflow in that space, in that environment, for up to 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. And there's research has even shown that it actually may survive in the air for longer than that. Sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. There is no timetable for this because it's different, right? It depends on the flow. Are there air conditioning? Are there not? Are there fans anywhere? Or how about this? How about that? The movement of air. So there are two ways that the virus travels. In bigger sized droplets and in smaller sized droplets. The bigger sized droplets, for them, the face mask will absolutely protect you, and the 1 or 2 meter rule will also help to protect you a little bit. Especially the 2 meter rule, if you're close to someone that sneezes or coughs. When it comes to the smaller droplet version, you will not be protected by anything, simply because when a person who leaves these droplets in a room, those droplets will be there for 3 or 4 or 5 hours. And you can come 2, 3 or 4 hours later, and you have no idea about the fact that some person who had it was in that room, and you can get it. And of course, as we know, surfaces, the virus can come to surfaces, and we have to clean our hands and blah, 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 blah. We all know that. That I don't need to go into because I don't need to be so basic. I just want to make this point. The virus travels in 2 different ways, in big droplets and in small droplets. With big droplets, face masks will help you even if the quality is not that high. With small droplets, the face mask must be of higher quality in order to protect you, because the droplets are so small and the viruses are more, in a way, left alone to their own size, in a way, so that the requirement of the face mask must be higher if you want protection. So that's basically it. And there is no one in the WHO who explains this to you. There is no one in the Norske Folkehelseinstituttet, the Norwegian Health Institute, that explains this to you, They will just explain to you that, well, if you isolate a virus, you will see that it's so small like that. Well, it doesn't matter, darling, how small it is. It travels in a medium, all right? And your work as an expert is to educate the public about how this virus travels, because that's what the public needs to know. The population in this world needs to know, how does this virus travel? That's what I need to know. How does the virus travel? If it is so small, when it is clinically, synthetically isolated in a laboratory, has absolutely no relevance to this situation. What is it that has a relevance? The thing that has relevance is this: if the virus travels in a medium, then I need knowledge about that medium. How does it travel? How big is that medium? How long can that medium survive in mid-air? Right? That's what it is. So the first thing I would like to say is that face mask is much more important than lockdown. Lockdown is something that should be used with extreme caution, because we know how dangerous it is for society. We know how negatively it impacts society as a whole. Whether it should be used or not as an instrument for containing this situation, we don't know. But we know that we're facing a pandemic, and people die in huge numbers, and the infection rates are soaring, and now we've had coronavirus practically nearly for a year. And also we know that from earlier situations that perhaps it will take 2 or even 3 years before things come back to so-called normal. And also another thing is that maybe this virus or mutations of this virus will be available in our atmosphere, in our oxygen environment for forever, basically. We don't know that. But so this is it. All right, the virus is like that. We need to know everything about the virus. The experts are right about that. You're so clever that you understand that you need to understand the virus. Bravo, hallelujah. I mean, you're a real PhD expert. You've understood that you need to analyze the virus, which is great, wonderful. Good job, You've studied for 10 years, and you've taken 2 PhDs to understand that. Congratulations. But that is just 30% of the knowledge that you need to convey to the public. How does the virus travel? That's what the public needs to know. Because they need to know, what can the virus do? Yes, that's one part of the question. The other part of the question is, how does it travel? How can it affect me? How does it enter into my life? So this is just one little thing about face masks, and this is why Europe has enormous infection rates, and why America has enormous infection rates, in my mind, simply because people don't use it, and especially because of the way that the transportation way number 2, the fact that the virus travels in very small droplets. Sometimes the virus travels in droplets that are so small that they are actually not affected by gravity. If the virus travels in a medium that is affected by gravity, okay, we are safer. We need to keep distance and use face masks when we know that someone is going to sneeze or cough. But for the smaller size droplets, we are much more vulnerable, and the experts, they don't tell us that. And it's silly, and just to say that, a doctor at a hospital must use it, but you don't have to use it. What's the difference between a doctor and you? There's no difference whatsoever. Absolutely no difference. So if you give protection equipment to a doctor, he will be protected, but you will not be protected, right? So that's the only difference. That's the only thing. So if it is like that some people in this world should have protection, other people should not have any protection at all, then that's all right. But then they could communicate that more clearly. So that's one thing. So the second thing I would like to say the first thing I wanted to say is about that. How does the virus travel? How does it affect us? Well, through droplets. Sometimes they are big, sometimes they are small, and that's basically it. The second thing that I wanted to say is, where is WHO? You even cannot find it. If you, twice a month there's some news from WHO on BBC or in the news. Apart from this, you as a person, as a world citizen, as a human being in this world, you have to find their website in a huge jungle of websites. You have to go there, you have to spend your own time going there, and you have to try to understand something about it. And the information is horribly displayed. It's complete amateur from beginning to end. And the only thing that the WHO must understand is that their only work, besides from scientific research, which they must conduct professionally and soundly and really truly carefully, the only work that they have apart from that is information. It is communication and information. It doesn't help to have a little nobody sitting in a chair and talking about something that he's not able to communicate. It doesn't help to have an idiot leading something, or it doesn't help to have people who are not able to communicate clearly. What leading institutions need are talents who are able to communicate, convey, explain, expose the things that we need to know, right? That this goes for the UN too. But of course, the UN cannot do it because we don't have freedom of speech in this world. So the UN cannot say the truth, because if they said the truth, then the whole world would go up in a bang, because all of these regimes that are repressing freedom of speech and who survives because of the lack of freedom of speech. So I mean, the UN has to wear a face mask for truth, because they cannot speak. Because if the UN spoke the truth, then the whole world would go down in 5 minutes, basically, because the regimes are so inappropriate, So, and this is why so many times I've said that the World Senate, we need a World Senate. We need a World Senate whose sole responsibility is communication to the public. Information and communication. This is what we need. Get the clever guys to produce information for the world. Get the talented people to produce information for this world so that people understand. Because when people understand, we feel safe. When I understand the situation, I understand it. Even if I'm in danger, I feel much better because I've been educated about the danger. I know what's going to happen. I know about the droplets. I know about big droplets. I know about small droplets. I know about droplets that are affected by gravity. I know about droplets that are not affected by gravity. So information is just really, really, really important. When it comes to the deeper analysis of how we relate to the coronavirus, of course I will not go into that, first of all, because I'm not qualified for that, because I'm not a scientist. Secondly, because I don't think it is important at all. The thing that is important is to get the basic knowledge out. And when the leading institutions fail miserably in even getting the basic information out, then there's something wrong. And so I mean that a little someone who's have spent 10 years in a lab or researching his PhD has understood that the virus is very small and the protein spikes, the spikes of protein are like this, and the things that actually happen is that these proteins are mutating over time, and they are slowly changing the architecture of the spikes, the architecture of the proteins are changing. But this is basically what happens, the proteins releases this and okay, right, okay, that's great, wonderful, we need that information. That is what you are here for, that's why we have education. But what the people needs to know is, how does this thing affect me? How does it travel into the world? How do I meet this guy? Well, how do I meet the virus? Well, you meet that virus in two ways: in bigger droplets and in smaller droplets. That's how you meet it. And so, and that's why face masks actually helps. It helps even when you're alone in a room, if it's a bathroom or something, because 10 minutes before you enter that bathroom, someone who was asymptomatic, a person who was asymptomatic but who had the virus, was breathing in that bathroom. Those droplets that leave his body, they are so small, they are so tiny that they are not affected by gravity easily. So when you go in there 10 minutes later, those droplets are practically, or might be, available. Right? All right, maybe I'm wrong about this. I accept that. Maybe I'm wrong about this. But the thing that I'm right about is that this world is about communication and information. And when the WHO is not able to communicate the knowledge that is good enough, when the leading institutions are not able to educate the public, then there's something wrong. And the financial funding of the WHO should go to distribution of knowledge, distribution of information. It should not go to fat salaries of people who drive around with private drivers, with maybe even servants and personal assistants. I mean, it should not. The budget of the UN, the budget of WHO, or especially the budget of the UN and things like that, should not go primarily to the salaries of the people who are lucky enough to work there, in that safety zone of the institution. It should go to the distribution of information, because information is what we need. So if the world is able to accept the distribution of precise, good, helpful information, then that's the only way that we should go. If the world is not able to accept the distribution of precise, good, helpful information, well, then we have a problem then, and then our institutions will not be enough, and then we would have to consider my proposition, my idea, namely a world Senate, that we need a world Senate, something stronger, bigger, more clever, more professional than the UN, who will deal with all the things that the UN and the WHO is not clever enough to deal with in a professional, transparent, and communicative manner. Because communication, education, clarity, the only value in this world is basically clarity. A writer knows that. A philosopher knows that. Everyone who works professionally with something knows that. Clarity is of utmost importance. Clarity is what art is about, or the art of science, or the art of understanding, or the art of education. Let's say the art of education. Clarity is what the art of education is about. Clarity, and in order to get clarity, you need talents who can provide that clarity to the public. So instead of protecting the safety of the people who work in these institutions, we should nurture and strengthen and support the idea that these institutions should be masters of communications. They should be masters of information. They should be masters of communication and education. That's what these institutions should be. Institutions like these, who takes care of the world health population, either nationally or internationally, should be a master of communication. And it's not like that in our world. And that's the only reason for this talk. The institutions who work professionally with this should be masters in communication, so that people understand. So that we understand what is this about. Then we feel much better. We feel clarity, we feel safety, we feel secure, we feel that someone is taking care of this because we care about it in a professional way. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry for being a little bit critical, but I just couldn't help it. All right, thank you.